Hello, this is Mr. Smith, also known as Teach Smith on YouTube. This is comparing power and conflict poems, Remains and Bayonet Charge, the week commencing the 22nd of June 2020. This video is primarily for Year 10 students at Reigate School, though of course other students are welcome to watch this video. So as usual, let's start with an Inspector Calls SPaG recap. Take a moment to pause this video and have a look. Remember, you can either print this out, copy out the paragraph, or write down just the corrections. So remember, there needs to be a comma after play. Burling must have a capital letter. It's the correct spelling of mysterious, the correct spelling of ghoul. Just check through your work and make sure you've made all of those corrections. So we're now coming to the end of this conflict cluster. We have looked at Remains and War Photographer, and now we're going to look at Remains and Bayonet Charge. So a quick recap of Remains, the main messages of the poem. Armitage explores the moral questions surrounding conflict. Armitage portrays the awful effects on PTSD on ordinary soldiers. Bayonet Charge was the named poem. This is a screenshot from the actual exam paper from 2017. Again, remember, this does not mean it won't come up again. And also remember that this is a useful poem to know in order to compare to other poems. It's useful to know as part of a cluster. So for example, if Remains or War Photographer comes up, you know that Bayonet Charge is a good example to compare to. So think about why that is. Why compare Remains and Bayonet Charge? Please pause the video and mind map or list why you think that's a good idea. Have a think about why comparing a poem like Remains and Bayonet Charge would be a good idea. Bayonet Charge, the main messages of the poem. Hughes explores the moral questions surrounding conflict. Hughes portrays the awful effects of conflict on an ordinary soldier. Again, I've framed this in a way to help you understand and to help you see the comparisons already between Remains and Bayonet Charge. Some further context of Bayonet Charge. This poem is about going over the top, but remember this is not a first-hand account. Just like with Simon Armitage, Ted Hughes did not go over the top himself. He did not engage in combat himself. However, Hughes' father had served in World War I, so this is a very personal and powerful topic for Ted Hughes. Finally, it's important to note that this poem was part of a collection called Hawk in the Rain. So it's important to note that there is natural imagery, nature imagery in this poem, and that is another possible way to compare this poem. Again, all poems can be compared to each other, just some have more stronger connections or more straightforward connections than others. Just quickly, this is what we mean by a bayonet. So it would be a long knife with a special grip and handle to allow it to be fixed to the end of a rifle. This would be so that if a soldier ran out of ammunition, they could use their bayonet as turning their rifle almost into a kind of spear. The charge would mean that you would charge with your knives forward towards the enemy. It is something that still happens. It is very rare, but it is something that still occurs. And I just want you to think about the nature of this. It's a very close-up, personal, and incredibly violent thing to do. There's a kind of disassociation or a kind of detachment that can happen if you're shooting at someone from far away. But that is not an option, and that is not the case when it comes to bayonets. So this is the question again. Compare how poets present the effects of war in Bayonet Charge and in one other poem from Power and Conflict. So I've chosen Remains for you. Thinking about the poems, how they're real. I've used the word graphic, but essentially it's real, it's realistic, it's not sugar-coated, there's no propaganda, it's very brutal. Okay, and then questioning your role as a soldier. Was it worth it? Was it the right thing to do? Was it the right thing to be? Okay, and then I'll come back to the structure point. So if we return to Bayonet Charge. So I want you to think about how this poem is very realistic in terms of portraying a battle, portraying a charge, and how the soldier questions his role as a soldier, how he questions what he's doing. So pause the video and try and find those two quotations. I also want you to think about the poem Remains. You should now know the graphic nature of the poem, the very realistic nature of the poem, and how he questions his role as a soldier. So I want you to look back at the poem Remains. Again, perhaps pause this video, look back at the poem Remains and think about those 2 points, the graphic description of conflict and questioning their role as a soldier. I hope that these make sense. The graphic description of conflict in Remains, when he shoots the looter with his 2 other soldiers, he sees every round as he rips through his life. Very, very graphic description of the bullets pulling the looter apart. And then the bullets smacking the belly out of the air. The soldier in Bayonet Charge could have just been as much of a victim there. The bullets just missing him, whizzing past him. Questioning his role as a soldier, his bloody life in my bloody hands. Cursing his role, cursing the killing. Living with the guilt on his hands, seemingly for the rest of his life. And then in Bayonet Charge, king, honour, human dignity, dropped like luxuries in a yelling alarm. So all of these sort of phrases, slogans, arguments used to recruit the soldier become empty and become pointless, it seems, in this moment. It just becomes about survival. And then the structure, again, one of my favourite things to talk about in Remains, it happens all the time. You know, that PTSD means he's reliving this memory all the time. The blink, the sleep, the dream. Every waking moment and every sleeping moment, it feels like he's reliving the memory. And I feel like that might be what's happening in Bayonet Charge as well. When it starts with suddenly he was awake and was running, raw in raw seamed khaki. So of course this happened perhaps to this soldier real for once, on one occasion. However, he keeps reliving it. Suddenly he was awake and was running. Perhaps when he's asleep, suddenly he has a nightmare of this charge again, or perhaps has a waking nightmare, or even sleepwalks. You never know. So I think both poems do explore PTSD in their own ways. In both Remains and Bayonet Charge, the poets show that the brutal reality of conflict causes the soldier in each of their poems to question their actions and why they became a soldier in the first place. In Remains, Armitage ends the poem with the soldier describing the looter's bloody life in my bloody hands. The repetition of bloody suggests that the soldier bitterly regrets his actions and still sees the blood of the looter on his hands. In Bayonet Charge, the reasons for fighting, king, honour, dignity, etc. are dropped like luxuries. The soldier must abandon these seemingly empty slogans as he simply wants to survive. Now, if you are a confident student by this point, I've left out certain things on purpose here. Okay, I've missed out a technique, I've missed out context. How could you add to this paragraph? How could you improve this paragraph at this point? Okay, consider that a kind of plenary activity. Think about what's missing in terms of technique, in terms of context. Thank you very much for watching Year 10. I hope this video has been useful. This is Mr. Smith, also known as Teach Smith on YouTube. Thank you.